Well, oh well, dear viewers. Today we have the final video on a topic that we've been discussing over the past few weeks. A topic that has been generating quite a number of interesting and just downright oddball arguments and conversations in the comment section. And that is the complete and utter failure of the new mode, Blast from the Past. You see, we are in the stage now of the update where Blast from the Past has entered into its final. If you don't know, you can go watch the past couple of videos where we talked about the subject. I'll link them in the description down below. But TLDR, Blast from the Past was a new temporary game type that was introduced with the most recent update, where you go through the history of the game, starting out, back in 2015 when the game launched.
2015? You mean we're in the future?
And as the update went on, the mode moved throughout the years. I believe it went 2015, 2018, 2020, 2022, and now we are in 2025. So the way the mode works is that you can take now all ships that have been added in the game up to 2025, with the exception of CVs, submarines, hybrids, anything with some type of burst fire, combat instruction, airstrike, outside of course, the ASW airstrike, because everyone has that. So you can't take any of those ships that are super gimmicky, that players love to complain about on the subreddit, on the Discord, and the forums. So you can't take any of those ships, but outside of those, you can take any tier 9 to 10 ship into this mode and enjoy the game without any of those ships. Again, the ships players love to complain about, especially CVs and subs, and that players swear up and down the game would be so much better if they didn't exist in-game. So, naturally, this mode is super popular, right?
Good guess, but actually no.
Well, no, not at all. How unpopular is it, Sealord? It is literally impossible for me to get a game of it just to get background footage of this mode. I sat in matchmaking for 32 minutes. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon right now. Well, 5:30 in the afternoon right now, and I could not get a game. 5 o'clock in the evening, prime time game time. People are home from work, people are home from school. This is normally when, the North American server starts to peak around this time, but no, nothing in this mode. 32 minutes and change is how long I believe I sat in matchmaking. Not a single game. Once again, Blast from the Past matchmaking time is making War Thunder Naval's matchmaking time look incredibly fast by comparison. So what's going on? Why is no one playing this mode that so many players have been begging Wargaming for years now, ever since, well, definitely since the CV rework, I would say at least, and most definitely since submarines have been added into the game, right? You see all these posts on the subreddit, the Discord, the forums, the fan-ran forums now, or the player-ran forums, I guess, whatever you want to call them. People swear up and down the game is so much better without submarines and CVs, and here's a mode where you can play the game without subs and CVs, but why aren't players playing it? Well, in the past couple of videos, there have been some interesting comments postulating why this is the case. And some arguments I do believe have more merit than others, but some are just absolutely just like pure copium, for lack of a better term. And I say that because keep in mind, again, with the level of rage and hate and some of the posts that I've seen, and I know that, those of you that have been around for some time have seen directed towards CVs and submarines, you would expect this mode to be absolutely bursting with those players that love to complain on the forums, but when they get what they want, for some reason they don't play the mode. Now, my argument has been this entire time that, those players that are shouting about CVs and subs, they seem to be in the very vocal minority of the player base because, well, obviously, players that have the option to pick between random battles and Blast from the Past, where now you can literally play, every ship that's been introduced up to 2025, with the exception of hybrids, ships with combat instructions, and burst fire modes, and of course the airstrike. So everything but a handful of ships, a handful of lines nowadays, you can play in Blast from the Past, but still, nobody's playing it. My argument has been that's because the vast majority of the player base are just average Joes that don't really care too much one way or another about CVs and subs, or at least they don't care enough to really hop into a mode where it's literally just random battles without CVs and subs. Now, of course, that has sparked a number of rebuttals. And again, I think some of them have more merit than others, but a lot of them I think are just kind of pure cope. You know, people don't like when their echo chamber gets shattered, you know? So I think there's a lot of that going on. But we're going to go over some of the more popular ones that I've saw over the past couple of videos where we talked about this topic. And the first and by far the most popular comment that I kept seeing, especially in the last video, was that, of course, no one's playing it because you can't grind out your missions in Blast from the Past. To which I've often replied, what missions are you talking about? Because if you go check your combat missions, you can grind out the dockyard missions, you can grind out the Laffy missions, the free doubloon and still missions for the anniversary, and the missions for Liberty Harbor right now. All of these can be ground out in Blast from the Past. The only missions that can't be ground out seem to be the ones that are exclusively limited to random battles, in which case, well, you can't grind them out in any other of the alternative modes either, but like, that's never stopped anyone from playing any of the alternative modes before. And what was really wild to me is that the most popular missions that you can't grind out are the campaign missions, which, unless there's a whole lot of new players that are still grinding out Halsey and Yamamoto, I don't really think that's peeling that many players off of playing the mode with no CVs and subs. Considering, again, you can grind out pretty much everything else, especially the big missions that are going on right now, where you can literally earn free money, free still, a free tier 8 premium, a free tier 9 premium. You can grind that out in the mode just fine right now. So I'm sorry, I don't think that's a very valid argument to make at this point. The next most popular one that I saw, oddly enough, is that your stats don't get tracked in Blast from the Past.
What?
Which, they don't get tracked in any of the other temporary game modes either. No, they don't get tracked in asymmetric battles. They don't get tracked in Unbreakable Line. They don't get tracked in Airship Escort. They don't get tracked in any of the temporary battle types. Yet, you know, most of the time when we have a temporary battle type, I think it's actually the first temporary battle type, that you can't just pop into matchmaking and get a match in at least a couple of minutes, at least during peak hours. So that's never stopped anyone from playing any of the other temporary battle types ever. So I don't see why suddenly stats not being tracked are suddenly a turnoff for, you know, the vast majority of the player base who don't really care about stats in the first place. So, again, not a very valid argument in my opinion. And the third most popular comment I kept seeing in the last video, which is absolutely wild that this is what a surprisingly high number of comments were in the last video, is that Blast from the Past doesn't give you the same rewards as random battles, when it quite literally has the exact same economy as random battles. Like, it's the exact same economy. If you do the exact same things in random battles as you do in Blast from the Past, if you can even get into a Blast from the Past game right now, you will make the exact same amount of credits and the exact same amount of XP. It's the same. So I don't know what people are going on about that. I'm not sure if they're tying that back to like the missions and such, when again, you can do like 90% of the missions that you need to do right now in Blast from the Past. Except for the campaigns, if you, for some reason, don't have Yamamoto or Halsey right now, right? Other than that, you can grind out all the combat missions, all the dockyard missions you want in Blast from the Past right now. And don't take my word for it, go check the combat missions right now. You'll see the little Blast from the Past icon sitting at the bottom with the list of modes that you can do those missions in. It's there. It's right there in front of you. So those are the arguments that I don't think have a whole lot of merit behind them and aren't really that valid. Now, there were some that I saw that made a little bit more sense. And one of those is that, well, it started out at tier 6 with a fairly stringent set of, you know, ships that you could take into battle because it was set in 2015. There weren't that many lines back in the day, obviously, so you can only take a handful of tier 6 ships. Yeah, I can see why it wasn't exactly overly popular there for a bit in the early opening phases, fair enough. But as it moved on and, you know, you got some more of the higher tier ships, which, by the way, like 80% plus of this game's population plays at tier 8 and above. So that's why, if you're wondering, you know, ranked is normally at, you know, tier 8, tier 9, tier 10. Same with clan battles or really anything competitive like COTS and such. Normally it's tier 10, tier 9, sometimes tier 8. That's why. I mean, obviously you're grinding to get those ships. Players want to play those ships, so there you go. But, well, you know, fair. You know, early on, I get why it wasn't that popular, but now that you can take all the tier 9 and tier 10s that you want, besides, of course, the ones that aren't allowed in the mode because they're too gimmicky and they're CVs or submarines, you'd expect that you'd see more players playing the mode at this time, but yet you still don't. So, like, I can see where it's like, yeah, it was tier 6, players didn't really get hooked on it because it's tier 6, but you would think as the mode went on and, you know, as the restrictions backed off, you'd see more players hopping into the mode. Unless the players just have an incredibly short attention span, which is also, I think, a pretty valid point too. So sure, maybe that argument, I can see that side of the argument for sure. Now another argument that's like a maybe for me is asymmetrics is around right now, so everyone's playing that because, you know, the player base is infatuated with the asymmetric game mode. So sure, asymmetrics is out right now. However, if you rewind the clock back to 14.5, update 14.5, which was, what, 4 months ago? That update had 9 modes available at once. You had randoms, co-ops, ops, ranked battles, clan battles, brawls, asymmetrics, and the unbreakable line, finally topped off with operations with flagships. So you had 9 modes in update 14.5 that were running at the same time, and matchmaking in all those modes was incredibly quick. And keep in mind, this is back in update 14.5. This is before we had all the anniversary goodness going on. We didn't have the free doubloons and still for logging in and playing a battle or two. We didn't have the GQ Johnny tokens. We didn't have the Lucian B dockyard. We didn't have the Laffy dockyard going just yet. So you had all those modes outside of the 10th anniversary festivities. Oh yeah, we didn't have the festive rewards going either. And every single one of those modes had very quick matchmaking, even here on the North American server, even at off hours, which was absolutely wild. In fact, 14.5 defied the seasonal trends for that time of the year. It tends to be in that time of the year, which is back in July, early August, you have the lowest number of players playing the game. With 14.5, we actually saw growth, which is absolutely wild. So then why in 14.5, when we have more modes available, we saw more players playing all these modes, but yet here with Blast from the Past, nobody's playing it, despite there being more players playing now than definitely ever throughout the year? It's a little odd, isn't it? Which again leads me to believe that, well, a lot of the players, seemingly the vast majority of the player base, doesn't really care about CVs or submarines to that level anyway, that they'll go out of their way to play, you know, basically random battles without CVs or subs. And I know what some are typing in the comments already. You know, I'm just a Wargaming simp, I'm a Wargaming shill, I'm trying to get into the CC program. Dude, I have been doing this for 7 years. I have been covering this game for 7 years. Don't you think that if I wanted to get into the CC program, I would have done it by now? Like, have you actually looked at the requirements to get into the CC program? It's not that high. It's 1,000 followers, and you have to do like 4 Warships related bits of content a month. The bar is not that high, really, to get into it. I would have joined it by now if I really wanted to, buddy. But the second you don't join these players that just shout and scream about every aspect of the game, they then, you know, direct their shouting and screaming towards you because they seem to be incapable of being objective. These are the same players, by the way, that like are cursing Wargaming for making them log in every day and play a handful of games to get a free tier 9 premium ship on top of a free tier 8 premium ship on top of all the other free stuff that Wargaming's been giving out during the anniversary. So take their shouting and screaming with a grain of salt. But anyway, with a grain of salt, while yes, it looks like on the surface that a large portion of the player base doesn't really care that much about CVs and subs, there are some things that I do think Wargaming has either intentionally or unintentionally done that has kind of led to Blast in the Past kind of being buried in this update. The first thing is that it wasn't really advertised all that much. There was an article on it on Wargaming's website. It was mentioned in the update video and such, but there is truly a lot going on right now, so it is kind of an easy mode to miss. Although, I mean, like, this is, again, my 3rd video on it, right? And I'm one of the larger Warships YouTubers, so I'd like to think, you know, from the 3 videos I've done on it, players kind of know that it's around, at least, my audience at least, right? Granted, the player base that, goes out and seeks, this additional content on the games isn't really that big compared to the overall player base, so there's that too. So, sure, Wargaming maybe didn't push it as much as they should have. Asymmetrics, they pushed that a little bit more. That's a bit of a fan favorite. Blast from the Past, bit of a newer mode. I mean, it's still there. Again, it's still in the update notes, still in their update video, still has its own article on the website. So maybe if they had bumped it a little bit more, it would have been a little bit more popular. But I mean, again, to be at the point where we're at now, where you sit in matchmaking for like 30 minutes, or you can sit in matchmaking for hours and not get a single match, I mean, I think that's kind of beyond just not being pushed as much as Wargaming maybe should have pushed it, right? Like, it's not hidden by any stretch of the imagination. It's there for all to see. So again, that's why I say, maybe. I would like to see Wargaming bring it back, maybe a couple updates from now, and just have it be Tier 9 to Tier 10, no CVs, none of the gimmicky ships, and just give it another whirl. Out of the gate, no Tier 6 game, or maybe even make it Tier 8 to Tier 10, Again, none of the gimmick ships, no hybrids, no CVs, no submarines, and let it go from there. Because, Tier 8 to Tier 10, again, that's truly where 80% of the player base does tend to spend most of their time. So that'll put it on a little bit more even footing and give it a better chance of catching on out of the gate. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're back in the same situation after a couple of weeks of it, right? This has been a very interesting time having this mode available in game, because it's like Wargaming finally gave into the demands, right, and gave us a mode without CVs and submarines, and it's an utter failure. Almost a handful of weeks into its introduction into the game, which has led quite a few of those commenters suggesting Wargaming intentionally sabotaged it, so they can go, look, we gave you guys the no CV and no subs mode, and nobody played it. Is that the case? I mean, like, if they had not allowed you to do any of the combat missions, none of the dockyard missions, none of the anniversary reward missions in the mode, I'd say, yeah, probably so. But just because it has a theme about going through Wargaming's history as part of the update, that's, Wargaming's 10th anniversary, I don't think that's enough by itself to say Wargaming intentionally sabotaged it. And again, maybe if it didn't get an article, if it didn't get mentioned in the update video, if it didn't get mentioned in the patch notes, I think you'd have a better argument there for Wargaming intentionally sabotaging the mode. I don't think, putting up against asymmetric asymmetric battles, which again, Unbreakable Line went up against and was just as popular as it ever was. I just don't think that's, what's causing it to be not played that much. I think simply the vast majority of the player base doesn't really care too much one way about CVs or sub. Like I said, the vast majority of the player base, they're your average Joe. They just want to get on, play a few battles of whatever, and then hop off for the night. They don't really get into the minutia of the game. We've all seen those players like that. You see them all the time because that is the vast majority of the player base. So this will be my final video on this topic. I know some of you will be very happy that I shut up about it, but I just want to, hop back in its final week when it's its least restrictive and literally bans all the ships that everyone loves to complain about on, again, the Reddit, the forums, and the Discord. Yet, again, here it is, as empty as ever. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. We'll have another fun comment section down there, I'm sure of it. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Do make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, all that jazz helps on the YouTube side of things. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.